There is a person in every room who seems to operate on a different frequency. They don't fight for airtime. They don't interrupt or overshadow. They don't fill the silence with nervous laughter or unnecessary words. They simply watch. They listen. They absorb. And when they finally speak, the entire room goes quiet. Not because they raised their voice, but because their silence has created a vacuum that demands to be filled. Their words, when they come, land with the weight of authority. People lean in. They remember. They act. You've met this person before. Maybe it was a colleague who barely spoke in meetings, but always seemed to know exactly what was happening behind the scenes. Maybe it was someone at a party who stood at the edge of the conversation, observing, only to make one comment that shifted the entire energy of the room. Maybe it was a leader who commanded respect without ever needing to demand it. Or maybe it was someone who broke your heart, not through what they said, but through what they refused to say. Their silence was louder than any argument could ever be. In a world that glorifies volume, that equates speaking with leadership and silence with weakness, these people have discovered something that most will never understand. They have learned that silence is not the absence of power. It is the concentration of it. While everyone else is busy broadcasting their thoughts, revealing their strategies, and exhausting their influence through constant noise, the strategically silent are gathering information. They are watching patterns. They are studying you, and by the time you realize what they know, they are already 10 steps ahead. This is not an accident. This is not personality. This is strategy, and it can be learned. You were never taught this. No one sat you down and explained that the person who speaks the least often holds the most power. Instead, you were raised in a culture that told you the opposite. Speak up. Make yourself heard. Don't let anyone talk over you. Share your ideas. Be visible. Be loud. And so you learned to fill every silence, to prove your worth through words, to compete for attention in a marketplace where everyone is shouting and no one is listening. But deep down, you've started to notice something. The more you talk, the less people seem to hear you. The more you explain yourself, the less they seem to understand. The more you try to prove your intelligence, your value, your worth, the more it seems to slip through your fingers like sand. You've begun to feel invisible, even while you're speaking, especially while you're speaking, because in your effort to be heard, you've become noise. And noise, no matter how loud, is easy to tune out. Meanwhile, there are others who have figured out a different game entirely. They have learned that attention is not given to the loudest voice in the room. It is given to the most deliberate one. They have discovered that influence is not built through volume but through precision. They understand that every word they speak either adds to their power or diminishes it, and so they choose their words with the care of a jeweler selecting diamonds. They do not waste their voice on trivial matters. They do not react impulsively. They do not reveal their hand too early. They wait, they watch, they let others exhaust themselves in the rush to be heard. And then, when the moment is right, they speak. And everyone listens. This is strategic silence, and it is one of the most powerful tools you will ever learn. Strategic silence is not about being quiet all the time. It is not about withdrawing from conversation or hiding in the corner. It is not about being passive or timid or afraid. It is about understanding that your words are currency, and currency loses value when you spend it carelessly. It is about recognizing that silence creates space, and in that space, power accumulates. It is about learning to observe before you react, to think before you speak, and to let others reveal themselves while you remain a mystery. When you master strategic silence, you stop being predictable. People can no longer read you, manipulate you, or dismiss you. You become a question mark in their minds, and human beings are wired to pay attention to what they cannot fully understand. Your presence becomes magnetic because it is not saturated. Your words become valuable because they are rare. Your opinions carry weight because you do not offer them to everyone about everything. You become someone who commands respect without demanding it, who leads without forcing, who influences without speaking. But more than that, strategic silence gives you something that most people never have: time. Time to think, time to process, time to observe what is really happening beneath the surface of every interaction. While others are busy reacting, you are analyzing. While they are defending, you are understanding. While they are revealing their weaknesses through impulsive words, you are gathering information that will allow you to respond with precision when the moment requires it. You are no longer controlled by the pressure to fill every gap in conversation. You are no longer hijacked by the need to prove yourself. You are free, and in that freedom, you become formidable. This is not manipulation. This is mastery. There is a difference. Manipulation seeks to control others through deception. Mastery seeks to control yourself through awareness. Strategic silence is about taking back control of your own voice, your own energy, your own power. It is about refusing to give away pieces of yourself every time someone asks a question, or challenges your position, or tries to pull you into their drama. It is about learning to hold your center, even when the world around you is chaos. It is about becoming someone who cannot be shaken because you have learned to be still. And the most beautiful part, this power is available to you right now. You do not need to be born with it. You do not need a certain personality type or a specific set of circumstances. You simply need to understand how it works and commit to practicing it. Because strategic silence is a skill, and like all skills, it can be developed through awareness, intention, and repetition. By the end of this journey, you will understand the mechanics of silence in a way most people never will. You will know why silence creates psychological leverage and how it shifts the balance of power in any interaction. You will learn the neurological reasons that make silence uncomfortable and how to train your nervous system to tolerate that discomfort without breaking. You will discover the exact techniques that allow you to observe, process, and respond rather than react. You will master the art of timing your words for maximum impact. You will build the internal foundation that makes silence feel natural instead of forced, and you will learn how to apply these principles in high-stakes situations where most people crumble under pressure. But more importantly, you will transform the way you see yourself. You will stop measuring your worth by how much you speak. You will stop feeling invisible when you are quiet. You will stop believing that silence means you have nothing to offer. Instead, you will begin to see your silence as a source of strength, a tool of influence, a mark of wisdom. You will realize that the people who speak the least often understand the most, and you will join their ranks. This is not about becoming someone you are not. It is about becoming who you have always been beneath the noise, beneath the pressure to perform, beneath the anxiety that makes you fill every silence with words you do not mean. There is a version of you that is calm, centered, and commanding, a version that does not need to prove anything to anyone, a version that moves through the world with quiet confidence and undeniable presence. That version has always been there. You have just been too busy talking to hear it. The world is full of people who are speaking. Very few are truly listening. Even fewer are strategically silent. And those who are? They are the ones shaping the conversation without ever raising their voice. They are the ones influencing decisions without ever making a pitch. They are the ones winning games that others do not even realize are being played. They are 10 steps ahead because, while everyone else is talking, they are thinking. While everyone else is reacting, they are observing. While everyone else is exhausting their power through constant output, they are conserving and concentrating theirs into moments of devastating precision. You are about to become one of them, not through force, not through imitation, but through understanding, through practice, through the deliberate choice to reclaim your voice by learning when not to use it. This is the invisible advantage, and it has been waiting for you all along. But before you can step into that power, you need to see what has been holding you back. You need to understand the exact cost of the pattern you have been living, because the truth is, you have been bleeding power for years and you didn't even know it. Every unnecessary word, every over-explanation, every time you filled an awkward silence because you could not bear the weight of it. Every moment you spoke just to prove you were smart enough, valuable enough, worthy enough to be in the room. All of it has been slowly, steadily draining your influence and eroding the respect others have for you. You wake up exhausted. Not just physically tired, but emotionally depleted. And you cannot quite figure out why. You tell yourself it is stress, it is work, it is the demands of life. But underneath all of that, there is something else, something quieter but far more draining. It is the constant need to explain yourself, to justify your choices, to fill every gap in conversation because silence feels like failure. You have been running a marathon with your mouth, and no one asked you to. No one is even watching. But you cannot stop. Think about the last conversation you had that mattered. Maybe it was with your partner. Maybe it was with a colleague or a friend. Do you remember what you said? More importantly, do you remember why you said it? Were your words deliberate, chosen for impact and clarity? Or were they reflexive, spilling out of you before you even had time to think? Did you speak because you had something valuable to contribute? Or did you speak because the silence was uncomfortable and you needed to fill it with sound? Now think about how the other person responded. Did they lean in, genuinely interested in what you were saying? Or did their eyes glaze over halfway through your explanation? Did they ask follow-up questions? Or did they change the subject as soon as you took a breath? Did they remember what you said the next day? Or did your words evaporate the moment they left your mouth? If you are honest with yourself, you already know the answer. And it stings. This is what constant noise does. It turns your voice into background music. It trains the people around you to tune you out, not because they do not care about you, but because you have taught them that most of what you say is not essential. You have conditioned them to wait for the summary, to skim your words rather than absorb them, to nod politely while thinking about something else entirely. And the more you talk, the more this pattern reinforces itself. You sense that people are not really listening, so you talk more, hoping that volume or repetition will somehow make them pay attention. But it does not. It just makes it worse. Your partner has stopped asking about your day because they know the answer will be a 15-minute monologue that circles the same points 3 times. Your colleagues interrupt you in meetings because they have learned that if they do not, you will keep talking long past the point where your idea was clear. Your friends make plans without you because every group conversation turns into a performance where you dominate the airtime, and they are tired of fighting for space. You think you are being engaged, participatory, social. They think you are exhausting. And here is the part that hurts the most. You know this. On some level, you have always known. You see the subtle signs, the way people glance at their phones when you start talking, the way conversations seem to die when you enter them, the way your opinions are overlooked, even when you have stated them multiple times. You feel invisible, despite being the loudest person in the room, and it makes you talk even more, trying desperately to force people to see you, to hear you, to validate that you matter. But every additional word just confirms what they already believe, that you do not know when to stop. This pattern does not just damage how others perceive you, it damages you. Because every time you speak without thinking, every time you share something you should have kept private, every time you explain yourself when no explanation was needed, you give away pieces of your power. You leak information that could have been leverage. You reveal weaknesses that should have stayed hidden. You show your hand before the game has even started. And in a world where information is currency, you have been spending yours like someone who does not understand its value. Think about the last time you overshared in a moment of vulnerability. Maybe you told a coworker about a problem you were having at home, hoping for empathy, only to have it repeated in a meeting as evidence that you were distracted. Maybe you explained your reasoning to a friend who was criticizing you, giving them all the ammunition they needed to tear your argument apart. Maybe you confessed your fears to a romantic partner, and instead of drawing them closer, it made them pull away, because now they see you as weak. In that moment, you thought honesty was strength, but you confused honesty with compulsion, and compulsion always costs more than it gives. The worst part is not what you lose by speaking too much. It is what you never gain. Every conversation where you dominate is a conversation where you do not learn. Every explanation you give is an opportunity you miss to ask a better question. Every time you fill the silence, you rob yourself of the chance to hear what the other person was about to say, the thing they were holding back, the truth they were about to reveal, the information that could have changed everything. But you will never know what it was, because you could not stop talking long enough to let it emerge. And then there are the boundaries, or rather, the lack of them. Because when you speak too much, when you share too freely, when you explain and justify and defend every little thing, you signal to the world that your boundaries are negotiable. You teach people that they can interrupt you, talk over you, dismiss you, because you have already shown them that you do not value your own words enough to make them count. You have trained them to see your voice as something abundant and therefore cheap. And once that perception is set, it is extraordinarily difficult to change. Your partner asks you where you were, and instead of saying you were out, you launch into a detailed account of every stop you made, every person you saw, every thought you had along the way. You think you are being transparent. They think you are overcompensating. You think you are building trust. They start to wonder what you are hiding, because people who have nothing to hide do not explain everything. They simply state the truth and let it stand. Your boss questions your decision on a project, and instead of defending your position with confidence, you spiral into a paragraph of justifications, referencing every piece of research you considered, every alternative you explored, every reason you chose the path you did. You think you are demonstrating thoroughness. They think you are insecure. You think you are proving your competence. They start to doubt it. Because confident people do not need to explain themselves into the ground. They present their reasoning clearly and trust that it will speak for itself. Your friend makes a casual comment that bothers you, and instead of letting it go or addressing it directly and briefly, you turn it into a therapy session. You dissect the comment. You explore why it hurt. You explain your emotional history and how it connects to this moment. You think you are being vulnerable and deepening the friendship. They think you are exhausting and start to distance themselves. Because friendship is not supposed to feel like work, and making every small moment into a referendum on your feelings makes it feel like work. This is the hidden tax of constant noise. It does not just cost you respect and influence, it costs you peace. Because when you cannot stop talking, you cannot stop thinking. Your mind is always racing, always preparing the next thing to say, always replaying what you just said, and wondering if it was enough, if it was right, if it made the impact you wanted. You are never present. You are always performing. And that performance is slowly killing the part of you that used to know how to just be. You used to be able to sit in silence without feeling like you were disappearing. You used to be able to listen to someone without planning your response before they finished talking. You used to trust that your presence was enough, that you did not need to fill every moment with proof of your worth. But somewhere along the way, you forgot. And now the noise has become so constant, so reflexive, that you do not even hear it anymore. It is just the soundtrack of your life, the hum of anxiety disguised as conversation. And the people around you, they hear it. They feel it, and slowly, quietly, they are learning to protect themselves from it. They stop sharing things with you because they know it will turn into an hour-long discussion. They stop asking your opinion because they know you will not just give it, you will defend it, explain it, and repeat it until everyone is exhausted. They stop inviting you to things where depth and presence are required because they know you will fill the space with words instead of connection. They still care about you, but they are tired, and you cannot blame them, because you are tired too. This is the cost of constant noise. It is not dramatic. It is not a single catastrophic moment. It is a slow erosion, a gradual diminishment, a quiet disappearance of influence, respect, and connection. And the cruelest part is that you have been doing it to yourself. No one forced you to overshare. No one demanded that you justify every choice. No one required you to fill every silence. You did it because you thought it was necessary, because you thought that speaking was the same as being heard, because you thought that volume equaled value. But now you are starting to see the truth. And the truth is this: the more you speak, the less you matter. The more you explain, the less you are understood. The more you fill the silence, the less space you have to think, to observe, to become the person who commands attention instead of begging for it. You have been living in a prison of your own words, and the door has been open the entire time. The door has been open, but you have been too afraid to walk through it. And that fear is not your fault. It was installed in you long before you had the awareness to question it. Long before you understood that silence could be anything other than punishment, rejection, or proof that you were not enough. The compulsion to fill every quiet moment with words is not a weakness in your character. It is a survival strategy your brain developed to protect you from something it learned to perceive as dangerous. And to dismantle that strategy, you first need to understand where it came from. You were not born afraid of silence. If you watch an infant, you will see that they are perfectly comfortable existing without sound. They observe, they absorb, they spend long stretches in quiet contentment, taking in the world around them without needing to narrate it. But then something shifts. The adults around them start to worry when the child is too quiet. Is something wrong? Are they okay? Are they happy? And slowly, the child learns that silence makes people nervous, that noise gets attention, that being loud means being seen. Your parents praised you when you spoke up in class. They worried when you were too quiet at family gatherings. They asked if you were upset when you sat in silence. And without realizing it, they taught you that silence equals something being wrong. That if you are not speaking, you are not participating. That if you are not making noise, you are not fully present. So you learned to perform, to fill the gaps, to prove through sound that you were engaged, happy, normal. And every time you did, you were rewarded. With attention, with approval, with the relief on their faces that told you everything was okay now that you were talking again. School reinforced this lesson with brutal efficiency. Participation grades were based on how often you raised your hand, not on the quality of what you said. Teachers called on you when you were silent, as if your quietness was evidence of distraction or disinterest. Group projects punished the observers and rewarded the loudest voices, even when those voices were not saying anything particularly valuable. You learned that silence was not neutral. It was negative. It meant you were not contributing, not trying, not good enough. And so you trained yourself to speak, even when you had nothing new to add. Because silence was not an option, it was a failure. And then there was the social world, which operates on an entirely different but equally powerful set of rules. You learned quickly that awkward silences were called awkward for a reason. They made people uncomfortable. They created tension. And whoever broke the silence first was the one who saved everyone from that discomfort. So you became the person who broke it. Every single time. Because the alternative, sitting in that silence and letting it exist, felt like standing in front of a firing squad. You could feel the judgment, the confusion, the question hanging in the air. Why are they not saying anything? Are they mad, bored, stupid? You filled the silence to escape that question, to prove that you were none of those things, to reassure everyone, including yourself, that you were still there, still valuable, still worthy of being included. But underneath all of this social conditioning is something even deeper, something wired into your biology. Your brain is a survival machine, and for most of human history, social exclusion was a death sentence. If your tribe rejected you, you did not survive. There were no safety nets, no way to make it on your own. So your ancestors evolved an incredibly sensitive alarm system designed to detect even the slightest hint of social rejection. And one of the most powerful signals of rejection? Being ignored. Being met with silence when you speak. Being left out of the conversation. Your brain interprets these moments the same way it interprets physical threats. Because for your ancestors, they were the same thing. This is why silence feels so uncomfortable in your body. Why your heart rate increases when a conversation drops off. Why your palms sweat when no one responds to your comment, why you feel a spike of anxiety when you are in a group and no one is talking. It is not social anxiety in the modern psychological sense, though that certainly plays a role. It is an ancient, primal alarm system screaming that something is wrong, that you are in danger, that you need to do something, say something, anything, to re-establish connection and prove that you are still part of the group. So you talk, not because you have something meaningful to say, but because your nervous system is demanding that you close the gap, that you eliminate the threat, that you survive. And modern culture has taken this biological vulnerability and weaponized it. You live in a dopamine-driven world that has trained you to equate noise with value and silence with irrelevance. Social media rewards the people who post constantly, who comment on everything, who broadcast their thoughts in real time without filter or pause. The algorithm doesn't care about depth or quality. It cares about volume, about engagement, about keeping you scrolling, clicking, reacting. You have been conditioned to believe that if you are not producing content, if you are not adding your voice to every conversation, you are falling behind, becoming invisible, losing relevance. This same dynamic plays out in every area of your life. At work, the people who speak up in every meeting are seen as engaged and ambitious, even if half of what they say is redundant or obvious. The person who sits quietly, processing and thinking deeply before contributing, is often perceived as disengaged or lacking initiative. In relationships, the person who constantly texts, calls, and checks in is seen as caring and invested, while the person who gives space and processes internally is often accused of being distant or cold. You have been taught that silence is absence, that if you are not making noise, you do not exist, and your brain chemistry reinforces this every single day. When you speak and someone responds positively, your brain releases dopamine, a little hit of reward that tells you this behavior is good. Keep doing it. When you share something on social media and people like it, comment on it, react to it, you get another hit. And just like any other reward system, you start chasing it. You start speaking, not because you have something to say, but because you are craving that validation, that proof that you matter, that dopamine confirmation that you are seen, heard, valued. And the more you chase it, the more you need it, until you cannot sit in silence without feeling like you are starving. But here is what your brain does not understand. That dopamine hit is not actually making you more powerful, more respected, or more connected. It is just making you more dependent, more addicted to external validation, more controlled by the need to fill every silence, because silence no longer feels like peace. It feels like withdrawal, like something is missing, like you are not enough unless you are producing sound. The neurochemistry of this discomfort is both fascinating and brutal. When you encounter silence, especially in a social context, your amygdala, the part of your brain responsible for detecting threats, lights up. It scans the environment for danger. Are people upset? Did I say something wrong? Am I being excluded? And if it cannot find a clear answer, it defaults to assuming the worst. Because in evolutionary terms, it is safer to assume danger and be wrong than to assume safety and be eaten. So your amygdala sounds the alarm. Your sympathetic nervous system kicks in. Your heart rate increases. Your breathing becomes shallow. Stress hormones flood your system. And your brain is screaming at you to do something to make this feeling stop. And what is the fastest way to make it stop? Talk. Fill the silence. Re-establish connection. Get a response from someone, anyone, that tells your nervous system the threat is over. You are still part of the group. Everything is okay. And so you do. You speak without thinking. You overshare without meaning to. You fill the gap because your biology is demanding it. And then, once the words are out, once someone has responded and the tension has eased, you feel relief. Your nervous system calms down. The alarm stops, and your brain files this away as evidence that talking was the right move, that silence was the problem, that you solved it by speaking. Except you didn't solve anything. You just reinforced the pattern. You taught your brain that silence is dangerous and talking is safety. And every time you repeat this cycle, you strengthen that neural pathway. You make it more automatic, more reflexive, until you reach the point where you cannot even sit through a few seconds of quiet without feeling compelled to break it. Not because you are weak, not because you are flawed, but because you have trained your nervous system to associate silence with threat, and threats must be eliminated. But here is the truth that no one told you. Silence is not a threat. It never was. The discomfort you feel in silence is not evidence that something is wrong. It is evidence that you have been conditioned to fear something neutral. Like someone who has been bitten by a dog and now flinches at every bark, you have learned to fear silence because it has been paired with rejection, judgment, and exclusion in your past. But the silence itself didn't cause those things. The silence was just there. And now you are reacting to the silence as if it is the danger, when it was never the danger at all. This is the root of your compulsion. Not weakness, not lack of discipline, not some inherent flaw in your character. It is biology meeting environment, meeting conditioning. It is an outdated survival mechanism, trying to protect you from a threat that no longer exists. It is a nervous system that has been hijacked by a culture that profits from your discomfort with quiet. And it is a pattern that you have reinforced thousands of times without ever realizing you had a choice. But you do have a choice. Now that you understand where this comes from, now that you can see the mechanics of it, you can begin to dismantle it. You can retrain your nervous system. You can rewire your brain. You can learn to sit in silence without your amygdala screaming that you are in danger. You can teach yourself that silence is not rejection, that quiet is not absence, that withholding your words does not make you invisible. It makes you powerful. You were never broken. You were just never taught. And now you are learning. And now that you are learning, you need a map. Because transformation without direction is just wandering. You need to know where you are right now, where you are going, and what each stage of the journey will feel like as you move through it. Mastery is not a switch you flip. It is a progression, a series of levels that build on each other, each one requiring different skills, different awareness, different levels of control. And understanding these levels will give you something most people never have: clarity. A way to measure your progress, a way to know that you are not stuck, you are just at a particular stage, and the next one is waiting for you when you are ready. Let me show you the 4 levels of silence mastery, and as I describe each one, I want you to be honest with yourself about where you are right now. Not where you wish you were, not where you think you should be, but where you actually are, because you cannot move forward from a place you refuse to acknowledge. Level 1 is unconscious reactivity. This is where most people live their entire lives. At this level, you are not choosing your words. Your words are choosing you. You speak without thinking. You fill every gap in conversation, not because you have something valuable to add, but because the silence is unbearable, and your nervous system is demanding that you break it. You seek validation through volume. You believe, on some unconscious level, that the more you speak, the more you matter. That if you are not constantly contributing, you will be forgotten, overlooked, left behind. At level 1, your internal experience is chaos. Your mind is always racing, always preparing what to say next, always replaying what you just said and wondering if it was good enough. You are not present in conversations. You are performing in them. And that performance is exhausting because it never stops. Even when you are alone, you are rehearsing, justifying, explaining things to an imaginary audience that is always judging you. Your thoughts are loud, relentless, and almost entirely focused on how you are being perceived by others. And how do others perceive you at this level? They see someone who talks too much, someone whose words have lost their impact because there are simply too many of them. They tune you out, not because they dislike you, but because listening to you requires too much energy and returns too little value. They interrupt you because they have learned that if they do not, you will keep going indefinitely. They stop asking for your opinion because they know it will come with a 10-minute preamble. You think you are being engaged. They think you are exhausting. And the gap between those two perceptions is where your influence dies. Level 1 is not a moral failure. It is simply a lack of awareness. You are operating on autopilot, driven by conditioning and biology, with no conscious control over the pattern. And most people never leave this level because they do not even realize they are in it. They think this is just who they are. But it is not who you are. It is just where you are, and you are about to leave. Level 2 is aware restraint. This is the first stage of consciousness. At this level, you start to catch yourself. You are mid-sentence, explaining something for the 3rd time, and suddenly you hear yourself. You notice the urge to fill the silence before it even arrives. You recognize the impulse to overshare, to justify, to keep talking past the point where your message was clear. You see the pattern. But seeing it and stopping it are two very different things. At level 2, you are aware, but you are not yet in control. You catch yourself mid-ramble and try to stop, but the words keep coming anyway. You feel the silence approaching and tell yourself you do not need to fill it, but your mouth opens and sound comes out before you can stop it. You know you are oversharing even as you are doing it, but the momentum is too strong. The habit is too ingrained. The discomfort of silence is still more powerful than your ability to tolerate it. So you speak, and then you feel frustrated with yourself for speaking, and that frustration just adds to the noise in your head. Internally, level 2 feels like being at war with yourself. You have awareness now, which is progress, but that awareness comes with judgment. You start to criticize yourself for every unnecessary word. You replay conversations and cringe at how much you talked. You promise yourself you will do better next time, and then next time comes and you do the exact same thing. You feel stuck, like you can see the cage, but you cannot figure out how to open the door. And that is because awareness alone is not enough. You need tools, you need practice, you need to build the capacity to tolerate discomfort without immediately trying to escape it. Others begin to notice a shift in you at this level, but it is subtle and inconsistent. Sometimes you are the same overtalker they have always known. Other times, you catch yourself and stop mid-sentence, which can feel awkward, but also strangely refreshing. They see you trying. They see you struggling. And if they are perceptive, they might even respect the effort. But they do not yet see you as someone who has mastered the art of silence. You are still a work in progress. And that is okay, because level 2 is not the destination, it is the bridge, and you are crossing it. Level 3 is deliberate silence. This is where real power begins. At this level, you are no longer just aware of your patterns. You are actively choosing your responses. You feel the urge to speak, but instead of being controlled by it, you pause. You ask yourself the strategic question: does this need to be said? Does it need to be said by me? Does it need to be said now? And based on the answer, you either speak with intention or you remain silent with purpose. You are no longer filling gaps, you are creating space. And in that space, you are gathering information, observing dynamics, and positioning yourself strategically. At level 3, silence is no longer something you fear. It is something you use. You have learned to tolerate the discomfort that comes with it. You have trained your nervous system to understand that silence is not a threat, that awkward pauses do not mean something is wrong, that withholding your words does not make you invisible. In fact, you are starting to realize that your silence makes you more visible, not less. Because now, when you do speak, people actually listen. Your words carry weight because they are rare. Your opinions matter because you do not offer them carelessly. You have become selective. And selectivity is the foundation of influence. Internally, level 3 feels like freedom. Your mind is quieter. You are no longer obsessing over every word, replaying every conversation, trying to control how people perceive you. You are present. You are observing. You are thinking before you speak, and that thinking is giving you a clarity you never had when you were drowning in your own noise. You still feel the pull to over-explain sometimes. The urge to fill silence still arises. But now you can sit with it. You can let it pass without acting on it. You have developed the muscle of restraint, and every time you use it, it gets stronger. Others perceive you very differently at this level. They notice that you have changed. You are no longer the person who dominates every conversation. You are the person who listens more than you speak, who asks better questions, who makes people feel heard because you are actually paying attention instead of waiting for your turn to talk. They start to lean in when you do speak, because your words are no longer background noise. They are signal, clear, intentional, valuable. You are beginning to command attention without demanding it, and that is when you know you are close to mastery. Level 4 is strategic mastery. This is the level where silence becomes second nature. You no longer have to think about it. You no longer have to fight the urge to speak. You have rewired your brain to the point where restraint is your default setting. You speak only when your words will add value, shift dynamics, or serve a strategic purpose. And when you do speak, every word is chosen with the precision of a master craftsman. There is no filler, no unnecessary explanation, no nervous laughter or verbal padding. Just clarity, just impact, just power. At level 4, your internal experience is calm. Your mind is not racing. You are not rehearsing what to say or replaying what you said. You are simply present, observing, thinking, processing. And when the moment is right, you speak. Not because you feel compelled to, but because you have decided to. And that decision is based on strategy, not emotion. You have complete control over your voice, which means you have complete control over your influence. You are no longer reactive. You are deliberate, and that deliberateness makes you formidable. Others perceive you at this level as someone who operates on a different frequency. You are the person in the room who seems to know things that others do not, who sees patterns that others miss, who speaks rarely but is always right. Your silence is not interpreted as weakness or disengagement. It is interpreted as confidence, as depth, as intelligence. People assume you are thinking something important when you are quiet, and they are usually correct. Because you are 10 steps ahead, not because you are smarter than everyone else, but because you have learned to observe while they are busy talking. You gather information while they are busy revealing it. And when you finally speak, your words land with the force of truth because they are backed by observation, strategy, and perfect timing. This is the roadmap, 4 levels, 4 stages of transformation. And the beautiful thing about this framework is that it is not rigid. You do not have to master one level completely before you start experiencing the next. You will move back and forth between levels depending on the situation, your stress level, and how much you have practiced. Some days you will operate at level 3. Other days you will slip back to level 1. And that is normal. That is human. The goal is not perfection. The goal is progress. The goal is to spend more time at higher levels than you did before, to catch yourself faster, to choose more intentionally, to become, over time, the kind of person who wields silence like a weapon and words like precision tools. So where are you right now? Be honest. And then ask yourself where you want to be 6 months from now, a year from now. Because the distance between those 2 points is not determined by luck or genetics or some magical personality trait. It is determined by practice, by awareness, by the willingness to sit in discomfort without immediately trying to escape it. The path is clear, the levels are defined, and you are ready to climb. You are ready to climb, but you need a tool to take the first step. Because awareness without action is just philosophy. You need something concrete, something repeatable, something you can use in the moment when your nervous system is screaming at you to fill the silence and your old patterns are pulling you back toward unconscious reactivity. You need a circuit breaker, a way to interrupt the automatic response before it takes over. And that tool is the pause protocol. This is not complicated. It does not require years of meditation or therapy or some mystical ability to transcend your humanity. It is a simple 4-step process that creates space between the impulse to speak and the act of speaking. And in that space, everything changes. Because that space is where choice lives. That space is where power accumulates. That space is the difference between being controlled by your patterns and controlling them. Let me walk you through it step by step, and then we will apply it to real situations so you can see exactly how it works. Step 1 is notice the urge. Before you can interrupt a pattern, you have to catch it. And the urge to speak has a signature. It does not just appear in your mind as a thought. It appears in your body as a sensation. Your chest tightens. Your throat constricts. Your breath becomes shallow. You feel a pressure building, like something inside you needs to get out. Your hands might move. Your posture might shift forward. Your jaw might tense. These are the physical signals that your nervous system is preparing to speak. And most people never notice them because they are too busy thinking about what they are going to say. But you are going to start noticing. Right now, as you listen to this, bring your awareness to your body. Notice where tension lives. Notice where the urge to speak would show up if it arrived right now. Is it in your chest, your throat, your stomach, your hands? Get familiar with your own signature. Because once you know what the urge feels like in your body, you can catch it before it takes over. You can feel it rising and say to yourself, there it is, the urge. And just by naming it, just by noticing it, you have already created a sliver of space between stimulus and response. Step 2 is count to 3. This is the most important step because this is where you physically create the gap. The moment you feel the urge, the moment you catch yourself about to speak, you stop and you count. 1, 2, 3. Slowly, deliberately. Do not rush this. 3 seconds is not a long time in objective reality, but it is an eternity in conversational time. 3 seconds of silence feels massive, uncomfortable, like you are doing something wrong. And that is exactly why it works, because in those 3 seconds, your prefrontal cortex comes back online. Your rational mind catches up to your reactive impulses. The urgency fades just enough for you to make a conscious choice instead of an automatic one. This is not about suppressing the urge. It is about creating distance from it. Imagine the urge to speak as a wave. If you are standing right at the shoreline, the wave crashes into you, and you have no choice but to react. But if you take 3 steps back, the wave still comes, but it does not have the same force. It does not knock you over. You can watch it arrive and recede without being swept away by it. That is what counting to 3 does. It gives you those 3 steps back. And in that small distance, you regain control. Step 3 is ask the strategic question. Now that you have space, now that your rational mind is engaged, you ask yourself 3 things. Does this need to be said? Does it need to be said by me? Does it need to be said now? These 3 questions are a filter, a way to separate signal from noise, a way to distinguish between words that serve a purpose and words that are just filling space. Be ruthless with this filter. If the answer to any of these questions is no, then you do not speak. You let the silence stand. You let someone else fill it. You trust that withholding your words in this moment is more powerful than offering them. Does this need to be said? Maybe the point has already been made. Maybe someone else just said the exact thing you were about to say. Maybe your contribution would be redundant, obvious, or unnecessary. If the conversation will move forward perfectly well without your input, then your input is not needed. Let it go. Does it need to be said by me? Maybe this is not your area of expertise. Maybe someone else is better positioned to speak. Maybe inserting yourself into this conversation would actually dilute your influence rather than enhance it. You do not need to contribute to everything. Selectivity is power. Choose your moments. Does it need to be said now? Maybe this is not the right time. Maybe emotions are too high. Maybe the other person is not ready to hear it. Maybe you need more information before you can speak with accuracy. Timing is everything, and sometimes the most strategic move is to wait, to let the moment pass, to save your words for when they will have maximum impact. Step 4 is choose consciously. Based on the answers to those 3 questions, you make a decision. If the answer is yes to all 3, then you speak. But you speak with intention, with clarity, with precision. You do not ramble, you do not over-explain. You say what needs to be said and then you stop. And if the answer is no to any of the 3 questions, You stay silent. You let the discomfort of the pause exist. You trust that your silence is communicating something far more powerful than words ever could. Confidence, control, depth. You are no longer reacting. You are responding. And there is a world of difference between the two. This is the pause protocol. 4 steps. Notice, count, ask, choose. Simple enough to remember in any situation. Powerful enough to transform every interaction. But simple does not mean easy. Because the first few times you try this, it will feel excruciating. Your body will scream at you to break the silence. Your mind will tell you that 3 seconds is too long, that people will think something is wrong, that you need to speak right now, or you will lose your chance, and you will want to give in. But you will not, because you know now that the discomfort is just your nervous system protesting the change. And discomfort is not danger. It is just unfamiliar, and unfamiliar becomes familiar with practice. Let me show you how this works in real situations. Imagine you are in a meeting at work. Someone challenges your idea. They say something that feels dismissive, maybe even disrespectful. Your immediate impulse is to defend yourself, to explain why they are wrong, to prove that your idea has merit. You feel your chest tighten, your throat constricts. The urge is there, strong and demanding. This is step 1. You notice it. You feel it in your body. And instead of acting on it, you move to step 2. You count. 1, 2, 3. In that space, you move to step 3. Does this need to be said? Maybe. Does it need to be said by me? Possibly. Does it need to be said now? No. Because if you respond immediately, you will sound defensive, reactive, weak. So you stay silent. You let the challenge hang in the air. You let someone else respond, or you let the conversation move on. And later, when emotions are lower, and you have had time to think, you address the concern with calm, clear reasoning. And because you waited, because you did not react, your response carries far more weight. Now imagine you are in an argument with your partner. They say something that hurts, something that feels unfair. Your instinct is to fire back, to defend yourself, to make them understand how wrong they are. Step 1. You feel it, the heat rising, the words forming. Step 2. You count. 1, 2, 3. Step 3. Does this need to be said? Maybe later. Does it need to be said by me? Yes, but not like this. Does it need to be said now? No, because anything you say in this moment will escalate the fight. So you breathe, you stay silent, you let the moment pass. And then, when you are both calmer, you revisit the conversation from a place of clarity instead of rage. And that clarity saves your relationship from damage that would have taken weeks to repair. Imagine you are at a social gathering, and someone starts gossiping. They are talking about a mutual acquaintance, sharing details that are none of their business. Your impulse is to join in, to add your own observations, to be part of the conversation. Step 1. You notice the pull, the desire to contribute. Step 2. Count. 1, 2, 3. Step 3. Does this need to be said? No. Does it need to be said by me? Absolutely not. Does it need to be said now? Never. So you stay silent. You do not join the gossip. And in that silence, you protect your integrity. You avoid saying something you will regret. And you send a message to everyone in that room that you are not someone who participates in that kind of conversation. Your silence speaks louder than any words could. Imagine someone criticizes you publicly. They are trying to bait you, to get a reaction, to make you look bad. Your instinct is to defend yourself, to correct them, to prove them wrong. Step 1. You feel the anger, the indignation, the urge to speak. Step 2. Count. 1, 2, 3. Step 3. Does this need to be said? Probably. Does it need to be said by me? Yes. Does it need to be said now? No, because responding immediately gives them exactly what they want. Your reaction, your defensiveness, your loss of composure. So you stay silent. You let their words fall flat. You let the awkwardness sit with them, not with you. And later, if it still matters, you address it privately with calm and precision. But most of the time, you will find that silence was the only response needed. Because people who criticize publicly are looking for a fight. And when you refuse to fight, they lose all their power. This protocol works in every situation because it is not about the situation. It is about you. It is about interrupting the automatic pattern that has been running your life and replacing it with conscious choice. And every time you use it, you are rewiring your brain. You are creating new neural pathways. You are teaching your nervous system that silence is safe, that pausing is powerful, that you do not have to react immediately to every stimulus. You can think, you can choose, you can respond with strategy instead of emotion. The first few times will be hard. You will fail. You will count to 1 and then speak anyway. You will notice the urge but ignore the rest of the protocol. You will ask the questions but answer them in ways that justify speaking even when you should not. That is normal. That is part of the process. But every attempt, even the failed ones, is practice. And practice builds capacity. So keep using it. In small moments, in low-stakes conversations. Build the muscle when the pressure is low, so that when the pressure is high, the protocol is already automatic. And over time, something remarkable will happen. You will stop needing to count. The pause will become natural. The questions will become instinctive. You will feel the urge to speak, and instead of fighting it, you will simply observe it. And then you will choose, not from fear, not from compulsion, but from power. And that is when you will know. You are no longer being controlled by your words. You are controlling them. And everything changes from there. Everything changes from there. And now you are ready for the next level. The pause protocol gave you control. It gave you the ability to interrupt the automatic pattern and make conscious choices about when to speak and when to remain silent. But control is just the beginning. Mastery requires more than restraint. It requires strategy. It requires a toolkit of advanced techniques that allow you to not just withhold your words, but to use your silence as a weapon, your questions as intelligence-gathering tools, and your selective disclosures as calculated moves in a game most people do not even realize they are playing. These are the advanced tools of the strategically silent, and once you learn to use them together, you will create something most people never achieve: an aura. A presence that communicates depth, competence, and authority without you ever having to announce it. People will lean in when you speak. They will wonder what you are thinking when you do not. They will respect you in ways they cannot fully articulate because they sense something in you that they do not see in others. Mystery, control, power. Let me show you how to build it. The first tool is the observation window. This is the practice of deliberately delaying your entry into any conversation or situation until you have gathered enough information to speak with precision. Most people enter conversations with their position already formed. They know what they think before they have heard what anyone else thinks. And because of this, they miss everything. They miss the subtext, the power dynamics, the hidden agendas, the unspoken tensions. They are so busy preparing to speak that they fail to observe what is actually happening in the room. But you are going to do the opposite. When you enter a meeting, a social gathering, a negotiation, or any situation where multiple people are interacting, you are going to open an observation window. You are going to sit back, watch, listen, and resist the urge to contribute until you understand the landscape. Who is aligned with whom? Who is trying to dominate the conversation? Who is being ignored? What is the real issue being discussed beneath the surface issue? What are people not saying that matters more than what they are saying? This observation window gives you a strategic advantage that most people never access. While they are revealing their positions, their biases, their weaknesses, you are gathering intelligence. You are learning who has power and who is pretending to have power. You are identifying alliances and conflicts. You are seeing patterns that would be invisible if you were busy talking. And when you finally do speak, you speak from a position of information superiority. You know things they do not know you know. And that knowledge allows you to position your words with devastating accuracy. Imagine you are in a business negotiation. The other side starts talking immediately. They lay out their terms. They explain their reasoning. They try to justify their position. And while they are doing this, you say nothing. You nod. You listen. You observe. You notice that their confidence wavers when they mention price. You notice that they keep circling back to timeline, which tells you that timeline is their real pressure point. You notice that one person at the table seems uncomfortable with the terms being presented, which tells you there is internal disagreement. And all of this information is being handed to you freely because you have learned to stay silent while others are compelled to fill the space. When you finally respond, you do not address their stated position. You address their actual needs. And because you have been observing, you know exactly what those needs are. You offer a solution that gives them what they actually want while protecting what you need. And they accept it because you have made them feel understood in a way that people who talk too much never can. The second tool is strategic ambiguity. This is the art of answering questions without actually revealing your position, of deflecting without seeming defensive, of maintaining your mystery while appearing to engage. Most people feel obligated to answer every question they are asked with complete honesty and transparency. But strategic ambiguity recognizes that not every question deserves a full answer. Some questions are traps. Some are fishing expeditions. Some are attempts to manipulate you into revealing something you should keep private. And strategic ambiguity allows you to navigate these situations without lying and without giving away your leverage. The key is to answer the question beneath the question, or to answer a slightly different question than the one that was asked, or to turn the question back on the questioner in a way that shifts the focus without seeming evasive. Let me show you how this works. Someone asks you in a professional setting, "What do you think about the new policy?" They are not actually asking for your opinion. They are trying to figure out where you stand so they can position themselves accordingly. A direct answer gives them information they can use against you. So instead, you say, "It is interesting. What is your take on it?" You have acknowledged the question without answering it. You have redirected the conversation back to them. And now they are the one revealing their position while you continue to gather information. Or someone asks you in a social setting, "Why are you being so quiet tonight?" They are implying that something is wrong, that your silence is a problem. A defensive answer would be, "I am not being quiet," or "there is nothing wrong." But both of those responses put you on the back foot. They accept the premise that your silence needs to be justified. Strategic ambiguity allows you to deflect without defensiveness. You smile and say, "Just taking it all in." Or, "I am enjoying listening." You have answered without explaining. You have maintained your position without justifying it. And the person asking the question is left with nothing to push against. This tool is particularly powerful in romantic relationships and dating. Someone you are interested in asks, "So what are you looking for?" If you answer directly, you give them a roadmap to either become what you are looking for or to disqualify themselves immediately. Either way, you lose the opportunity to see who they actually are. Strategic ambiguity allows you to keep your cards close. You say, "I am still figuring that out. What about you?" Or, "I think it depends on the person." You have engaged without committing. You have invited them to reveal themselves while you remain a mystery. And mystery, in the early stages of attraction, is far more powerful than transparency. The third tool is the power of the pause. You have already learned to pause before you speak, but now you are going to learn to pause while you are speaking, to create intentional silence in the middle of a sentence, to let your words hang in the air and force the other person to sit with them. This is one of the most underutilized tools in communication, and it is devastatingly effective when used correctly. Most people are terrified of pauses in conversation. They rush to fill them. They keep talking to avoid the discomfort. But you are going to do the opposite. You are going to use the pause to create tension, to emphasize a point, to give weight to what you just said, to force the other person to truly absorb your words instead of just waiting for their turn to talk. Imagine you are giving feedback to someone on your team. You say, "I need you to understand something." Then you pause. 3 seconds. 5 seconds. Let the silence sit. Let them lean in. Let them wonder what is coming. Then you continue. This project is important. Pause. And right now, it is not meeting the standard. Another pause. Do you understand what I am saying? The pauses make every word hit harder. They create space for the message to land. They communicate that what you are saying is serious, that it requires thought, that it cannot be dismissed or glossed over. Without the pauses, the same words would be just another piece of feedback. With the pauses, they become a moment the person will remember. Or imagine you are in a conflict with someone who is talking over you, dominating the conversation, trying to steamroll you with volume. You do not raise your voice. You do not talk faster. You do the opposite. You slow down, you pause, you let the silence interrupt their momentum. And when you speak again, you speak quietly, calmly, with pauses between your sentences. And something fascinating happens. They stop talking, because the contrast between their noise and your silence creates a tension that demands resolution. And they cannot resolve it by talking more. They have to stop and listen. And in that moment, you have taken control of the conversation without ever raising your voice. The fourth tool is selective disclosure. This is the practice of treating your words, your stories, your information like currency. You do not spend it carelessly. You do not give it away for free. You decide what to reveal, when to reveal it, and to whom. Because every piece of information you share is a piece of leverage you no longer have, and the people who understand this principle are the ones who maintain power in every interaction. Selective disclosure means you do not tell everyone everything. You do not share your plans before they are ready. You do not reveal your strategies to people who have not earned your trust. You do not overshare your personal life with colleagues who will use it to diminish you. You keep your cards close. And when you do choose to share something, it is intentional. It serves a purpose. It builds a specific connection or achieves a specific goal. In leadership, selective disclosure looks like sharing information on a need-to-know basis. You do not broadcast every decision you are considering. You do not reveal every option you are weighing. You gather input where it is useful, but you keep your final decision private until the right moment. And when you do reveal it, people respect it because you have not diluted it by overthinking it aloud with everyone who would listen. In personal relationships, selective disclosure looks like revealing yourself slowly. Not because you are manipulative, but because depth should be earned, not given freely. You do not tell your entire life story on the first date. You do not share your deepest fears with someone who has not proven they can hold them with care. You let people discover you over time. And that discovery process creates connection in a way that immediate transparency never can. The fifth tool is the echo technique. This is a way to engage in conversation, build rapport, and make people feel heard without actually contributing much content of your own. You simply repeat back key phrases or ideas that the other person has said. This serves two purposes. First, it makes them feel understood and valued, which builds trust and connection. Second, it keeps you in observation mode, gathering information while appearing to participate. Someone says to you, "I am just so frustrated with how this project is being handled." Instead of jumping in with your own opinion or advice, you say, "You are frustrated with how it is being handled. That is it." You have echoed their words back to them. And watch what happens. They will almost always expand on what they just said. They will give you more information, more context, more emotion, and you continue to gather while they continue to reveal. You are in the conversation, but you are not exposing yourself. You are building rapport, but you are not giving away leverage. This technique is incredibly powerful in negotiations, therapy, coaching, and leadership. It makes the other person feel heard without requiring you to agree, disagree, or take a position. It keeps you neutral while they feel supported, and it allows you to guide the conversation through careful selection of what you choose to echo. These 5 tools, the observation window, strategic ambiguity, the power of the pause, selective disclosure, and the echo technique work together to create a presence that most people spend their entire lives trying to manufacture through words. But you are not manufacturing anything. You are simply being deliberate, strategic, controlled, and that control becomes magnetic. People want to know what you are thinking. They want to earn your words. They respect your silence because your silence has become a signal of depth rather than absence. You have stopped being noise, and you have become signal. Pure, undeniable, powerful signal. You have become signal. Pure, powerful, deliberate signal. But signal cannot sustain itself on technique alone. You can master every tool, execute every protocol perfectly in the moment, and still find yourself slipping back into old patterns if the foundation beneath you is weak. Because transformation is not just about what you do when you remember to be strategic. It is about who you are becoming when no one is watching. It is about the environment you create, the habits you build, the identity you cultivate day by day in the quiet spaces of your life, where there is no pressure, no audience, no immediate reward. This is where lasting change is made. Not in the spotlight, but in the solitude. Not in the performance, but in the preparation. If you want strategic silence to become second nature, you cannot just practice it in conversations. You have to build a life that supports it. You have to design your environment, your routines, and your relationships in ways that make silence your default setting rather than something you have to force. This is the foundation. And without it, everything else will eventually crumble. The first pillar of this foundation is solitude, not isolation, not loneliness. Solitude, the intentional practice of being alone with yourself, without distraction, without input, without the noise of the world filling your head. Most people are terrified of solitude because they have never learned to be comfortable with their own thoughts. They fill every moment with music, podcasts, social media, television, anything to avoid the discomfort of silence. But that avoidance is exactly what keeps them trapped in compulsive talking. Because if you cannot sit in silence with yourself, you will never be able to sit in silence with others. You need to cultivate solitude as a daily practice. This does not mean you have to become a hermit or spend hours meditating in a cave. It means you need regular time, even just 10 or 15 minutes a day, where you are alone, quiet and undistracted. No phone, no music, no input, just you and your thoughts. At first, this will feel unbearable. Your mind will race. You will feel restless. You will want to reach for something, anything, to fill the void. But you will resist that urge. You will sit with the discomfort. And over time, something remarkable happens. The discomfort fades, your mind settles, and you begin to discover a version of yourself that you have been drowning out with noise for years. A version that is calm, centered, and deeply comfortable with silence. This comfort with solitude translates directly into comfort with silence in social situations. Because if you can be at peace alone, you can be at peace in a quiet room full of people. You no longer need external stimulation to feel okay. You no longer need to fill the gaps because the gaps do not scare you anymore. You have learned that silence is not a void, it is a space. And space is where clarity lives. The second pillar is reducing dopamine-seeking behavior. You live in a world designed to hijack your attention and keep you in a constant state of craving. Social media notifications, news alerts, endless streams of content engineered to trigger the reward centers in your brain and keep you coming back for more. Every like, every comment, every new piece of information gives you a little hit of dopamine. And just like any other addiction, you start to need more and more stimulation just to feel normal. This constant dopamine chase trains your brain to be restless, to seek novelty, to fear boredom. And that fear of boredom is what drives compulsive talking. Because talking, especially talking about yourself, releases dopamine. It feels good in the moment. But it is destroying your ability to be present, to think deeply, and to sit comfortably in silence. You need to detox, not forever, but regularly. You need periods where you drastically reduce your input, where you limit social media to a few minutes a day, or cut it out entirely for a week, where you stop consuming news constantly and let yourself be uninformed about the latest outrage or controversy, where you resist the urge to check your phone every 5 minutes and instead let yourself be bored. Boredom is not the enemy. Boredom is the gateway to deeper thought, to creativity, to the kind of reflection that cannot happen when your brain is constantly being stimulated by external sources. When you reduce dopamine-seeking behavior, you recalibrate your nervous system. You lower your baseline need for stimulation. And that lower baseline makes silence feel natural instead of uncomfortable. You stop needing to talk to feel engaged because you are no longer addicted to the dopamine hit that talking provides. You become comfortable with less, and in that comfort, you find more. The third pillar is self-awareness, and the most effective tool for building self-awareness is journaling. Not the kind of journaling where you vent about your day or write affirmations you do not believe. The kind of journaling where you analyze your patterns, track your triggers, and hold yourself accountable for your progress. Every day, or at least several times a week, you sit down and you write. You write about the moments when you spoke too much and why. You write about the moments when you stayed silent and how it felt. You write about the urges you noticed, the pauses you took, the choices you made. You look for patterns. What situations make you most likely to overtalk? What emotions trigger compulsive speech? What people bring out your best silence, and what people pull you back into old habits? This kind of reflective practice builds a level of self-awareness that most people never achieve, because most people never stop long enough to examine their own behavior. They just keep repeating the same patterns and wondering why nothing changes. But you are different. You are taking the time to understand yourself at a deeper level, and that understanding is what allows you to make different choices. You cannot change what you cannot see. Journaling makes the invisible visible. It shines a light on the patterns that have been running in the background of your life. And once you see them clearly, you can begin to dismantle them. The fourth pillar is building an identity that does not depend on external validation. This is perhaps the most difficult but most important shift you will make, because as long as you need other people to confirm your worth, you will always be tempted to overtalk. You will speak to prove you are smart enough, valuable enough, interesting enough. But people who have internalized their own worth do not need to prove anything. They know who they are, and that knowing makes them quiet in the most powerful way. This shift requires you to stop measuring yourself by external metrics. Stop counting how many people laughed at your joke. Stop tracking how many people liked your post. Stop evaluating your worth based on whether people agreed with you in a meeting. These external validations are empty. They feel good for a moment, but they do not build real confidence. Real confidence comes from internal validation, from knowing that your worth is not up for debate, from trusting that you have value even when no one is acknowledging it. And that trust is built through action, through doing hard things and proving to yourself that you can, through keeping promises to yourself, through living according to your values even when it costs you something. When you build this kind of internal foundation, you stop needing to talk to feel seen, because you see yourself, and that is enough. The fifth pillar is energy management. You need to understand that talking is energy expenditure. Every word you speak costs you something, and most people are walking around energetically bankrupt because they have been spending their energy carelessly for years. They talk when they do not need to. They explain when no explanation is required. They fill silence because they think silence is empty. But silence is not empty. Silence is where your energy accumulates. It is where your presence builds. It is where you recharge so that when you do speak, your words carry the full force of your being. Start paying attention to how you feel after conversations. Do you feel energized or drained? If you feel drained, it is because you gave away too much. You overtalked. You over-explained. You spent energy that you should have conserved. But when you practice strategic silence, when you speak only when necessary and withhold when appropriate, you will notice something different. You will leave conversations feeling more energized than when you entered them, because you were not depleting yourself. You were accumulating, and that accumulated energy becomes a presence that others can feel even when you are not speaking. The sixth pillar is choosing your relationships carefully. Not everyone will understand or respect your journey toward strategic silence. Some people will interpret your silence as rejection. They will push you to talk more, to explain yourself, to go back to being the version of you that made them comfortable. And you need to be prepared for this. You need to recognize that some relationships were built on your willingness to overfunction, to over-explain, to fill every gap. And as you change, those relationships may not survive. And that is okay, because you are not responsible for other people's comfort with your growth. You need to surround yourself with people who respect silence, who value depth over volume, who do not punish you for being quiet or demand that you perform for their entertainment. These people exist. They are the ones who listen more than they talk, who ask thoughtful questions, who can sit with you in silence without it feeling awkward. Seek them out. Build relationships with them. And let go of the ones who drain you with their constant need for noise. The seventh pillar is training your nervous system through physical practices. Your body and your mind are not separate. If your body is in a state of chronic tension, your mind will struggle to be calm. And if your nervous system is dysregulated, your ability to tolerate silence will be compromised. You need to incorporate physical practices that teach your body to be at ease. Breathwork is one of the most powerful tools for this. Deep, slow breathing activates your parasympathetic nervous system and tells your body that you are safe. When you are safe, you do not need to fill silence. You can simply be. Grounding exercises, where you focus on physical sensations, the feeling of your feet on the ground, the texture of an object in your hand, the temperature of the air on your skin, bring you into the present moment and out of the anxious future thinking that drives compulsive talking. Mindful movement, whether it is yoga, walking, or any form of exercise done with full attention, trains your nervous system to stay present even when discomfort arises. These practices aren't separate from your work with silence. They are foundational to it. Transformation is not just about what you do in moments of choice. It is about who you are becoming day by day. Technique will carry you through individual interactions, but foundation will carry you through your entire life. Build it slowly. Build it deliberately. And build it in the quiet spaces where no one is watching, because that is where the real work happens. That is where you become the person who does not need to talk to prove their worth, who does not need validation to feel whole, who does not need noise to feel alive. You become someone who is comfortable in the silence, and that comfort becomes your power. That comfort becomes your power, and now you need to understand why. Not just on an intuitive level, not just because you have felt the shift in your own experience, but because science confirms what you are living. Because when you understand the mechanisms behind transformation, when you can see the neurological evidence that your brain is literally changing, you gain a different kind of confidence. You stop questioning whether this is real. You stop doubting whether the changes will last. You know, with scientific certainty, that strategic silence is not just a psychological trick or a social strategy. It is a biological upgrade, a rewiring of your brain that makes you fundamentally more capable, more controlled, and more powerful than you were before. Let me show you what is happening inside your skull every time you choose silence over reaction. Every time you pause before speaking. Every time you withhold when your old pattern would have compelled you to share. Because the science is not just interesting, it is proof that you are not imagining this transformation. You are creating it, neuron by neuron, synapse by synapse, one strategic choice at a time. The prefrontal cortex is the part of your brain located just behind your forehead, and it is responsible for everything that makes you human. Executive function, impulse control, planning, decision-making, the ability to think about the future and choose actions that serve your long-term goals over your short-term impulses. This is the part of your brain that allows you to pause before speaking, to consider consequences before acting, to override your immediate emotional reactions with rational thought. And here is the crucial part. This region is not fixed. It is not static. It grows stronger or weaker based on how you use it. Every time you practice strategic silence, every time you feel the urge to speak and choose to pause instead, you are exercising your prefrontal cortex. You are asking it to inhibit an impulse, to delay gratification, to hold space between stimulus and response. And just like a muscle that gets stronger with use, your prefrontal cortex thickens. Brain imaging studies show that people who regularly practice impulse control, whether through meditation, strategic communication, or other forms of restraint, have measurably larger and more active prefrontal cortices than people who act on every impulse. This is not metaphorical. This is structural. Your brain is physically changing, and as it changes, impulse control becomes easier. What used to require enormous effort becomes automatic. What used to feel like restraint becomes your natural response. But there is more happening than just strengthening your prefrontal cortex. There is also a weakening of the pathways that used to control you. The amygdala, your brain's alarm system, the part that screams danger when silence appears, begins to calm down. Studies using functional MRI scans show that people who practice mindfulness and strategic restraint have lower amygdala activation in response to uncomfortable situations. This means that silence, which used to trigger a threat response in your nervous system, stops feeling dangerous. Your amygdala learns that silence is not rejection, that pauses are not failure, that withholding your words does not mean you are disappearing. And as it learns this, it stops sounding the alarm. The anxiety that used to flood your system when you stayed quiet begins to fade. And in the absence of that anxiety, you find peace. Now let us talk about mirror neurons. These are specialized cells in your brain that fire both when you perform an action and when you observe someone else performing that action. They are the reason you flinch when you see someone else get hurt, the reason you smile when someone smiles at you, the reason emotions are contagious, and they are the reason your silence influences others in ways you may not fully realize. When you remain calm and silent in a situation where others expect reactivity, their mirror neurons are firing as they observe you, and those neurons are communicating a message to their own nervous systems. This person is not threatened. This person is in control. And unconsciously, without even realizing it, their own nervous systems begin to calm. They begin to mirror your composure. Your silence does not just affect you. It affects everyone in the room. This is why strategically silent people are perceived as leaders. Their calm is contagious. Their restraint signals confidence. And because human beings are wired to follow those who seem most capable of navigating danger, people naturally defer to the person who remains unshaken when others are reactive. You are not just controlling your own nervous system through silence. You are influencing theirs. And that influence is happening at a neurological level that bypasses conscious thought. Then there is the default mode network, a set of brain regions that activate when you are not focused on a specific task, when you are daydreaming, reflecting, or simply sitting in silence. For years, scientists thought this network was just the brain idling, doing nothing important. But recent research has revealed that the default mode network is where some of your most important cognitive work happens. It is where you process experiences, integrate information, generate insights, and solve problems that your conscious mind could not crack. And here is the key. This network only activates when you stop taking in new input. When you stop talking, stop consuming, stop engaging with external stimuli, and let your mind wander. This is why strategic silence enhances creativity and problem solving. When you are constantly talking, constantly engaging, constantly filling every moment with input or output, you never give your default mode network a chance to do its work. But when you embrace silence, when you create space for your mind to rest and reflect, this network comes online. And that is when the breakthroughs happen, the insights, the connections between ideas that seemed unrelated, the solutions to problems you have been wrestling with for weeks. Silence is not emptiness. It is the condition under which your deepest thinking occurs. Now let us examine the relationship between stress, speech, and cortisol. Cortisol is your primary stress hormone, released by your adrenal glands when your brain perceives a threat. In small doses, cortisol is helpful. It prepares your body for action. But chronic elevation of cortisol, the kind that comes from living in a constant state of reactivity, damages your brain. It impairs memory. It weakens your immune system. It accelerates aging. And here is what most people do not realize. Compulsive talking elevates cortisol. When you over-explain, when you justify yourself defensively, when you fill silence because your nervous system is in alarm mode, you are triggering a stress response. Your body interprets the urgency you feel to speak as evidence that you are under threat. And it releases cortisol to help you deal with that threat. But intentional silence does the opposite. When you pause, when you breathe, when you choose not to react, you activate your parasympathetic nervous system, the system responsible for rest and recovery. Your heart rate slows, your breathing deepens, and your cortisol levels drop. Study after study confirms this. People who practice strategic communication and mindful restraint have lower baseline cortisol levels than people who are chronically reactive. This is not just about feeling calmer. This is about your body being in a healthier, more sustainable state. Strategic silence is not just good for your relationships and your influence, it is good for your biology. And then there is the research on power dynamics and conversational patterns. Multiple studies across decades have consistently shown that people who speak less in group settings are perceived as more competent, more trustworthy, and more authoritative than people who dominate conversations. One landmark study, published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, found that participants who contributed fewer but higher quality comments in discussions were rated by their peers as more intelligent and more leader-like than participants who contributed frequently but with less precision. Another study on workplace dynamics showed that employees who spoke less in meetings but chose their moments carefully were more likely to be promoted than employees who tried to contribute to every discussion. This flies in the face of what most people believe. Most people think that visibility equals value, that the more you speak, the more influence you have. But the research says otherwise. Influence is not about volume. It is about signal-to-noise ratio. And the people who understand this, who speak rarely but powerfully, are the ones who rise. Not because they are smarter, but because they are strategic. And that strategy is rooted in an understanding of how human perception works. We pay more attention to scarcity than abundance. We value what is rare. And when your words are rare, they become valuable. There is also compelling research on listening and retention. When you are talking, you are not learning. This is not opinion. This is cognitive science. Your brain cannot simultaneously generate speech and deeply process incoming information. When you are formulating what you are going to say next, you are not fully hearing what the other person is saying. You are in output mode, not input mode. But when you practice strategic silence, when you listen more than you speak, you retain more information. You understand more nuance. You pick up on details that others miss, and that information becomes leverage. The more you know, the more precisely you can act. And the more precisely you act, the more effective you become. But perhaps the most powerful piece of science is the concept of neuroplasticity. Your brain is not hardwired. The pathways that have been running your behavior for years, the automatic reactions, the compulsive patterns, the urge to fill every silence, these are not permanent. They are just well-worn, and with consistent practice, you can create new pathways. Every time you pause instead of react, every time you choose silence instead of filling the gap, you are weakening the old pathway and strengthening a new one. At first, the new pathway is faint, barely there. The old pathway is still the default. But with repetition, the new pathway thickens. It becomes more efficient, and eventually it becomes the default. This is not willpower. This is not forcing yourself to be someone you are not. This is biology. This is your brain adapting to the behaviors you practice most consistently. Neuroscientists estimate that it takes approximately 8 to 12 weeks of consistent practice for a new behavior to become automatic at the neural level. 8 to 12 weeks, that is all. Less than 3 months of intentionally practicing strategic silence, of using the pause protocol, of building the foundation, and your brain will have rewired itself to the point where restraint is easier than reactivity, where silence feels more natural than noise, where you no longer have to think about it because your nervous system has adapted. The transformation is not just psychological. It is biological. It is measurable. It is real. And this is why you can trust the process. This is why you can believe that the changes you are making will last. Because you are not relying on motivation or willpower or some fragile commitment that will fade when life gets hard. You are relying on neuroscience, on the brain's inherent capacity to change itself based on the behaviors you practice. You are building new neural architecture. And once that architecture is in place, it does not just disappear. It becomes who you are. So when doubt creeps in, when you wonder if this is really working, when you feel like you are slipping back into old patterns, remember this. Your brain is changing. The prefrontal cortex is strengthening. The amygdala is calming. The default mode network is activating. Cortisol is decreasing. New pathways are forming. And every single choice you make, every pause, every moment of strategic silence is building the brain of the person you are becoming. This is not faith. This is science. and the science is on your side. The science is on your side, but science lives in laboratories and textbooks. Real life lives in the fire. In the moments when your heart is pounding and your hands are shaking and every instinct in your body is screaming at you to speak, to defend, to explain, to fight back. This is where theory meets reality. This is where you discover whether strategic silence is just an interesting concept or an actual superpower. Because anyone can be silent when life is calm, when conversations are easy, when nothing is at stake. But the true test of mastery is whether you can hold your silence when everything inside you wants to break it, when the pressure is crushing, when the stakes are real, when silence feels like the hardest thing you have ever done. Let me walk you through the fire. Let me show you how to apply everything you have learned in the moments that matter most. Because this is not abstract anymore. This is war. And silence is your weapon. The first battlefield is the argument. You are in a fight with someone you care about, your partner, your parent, your closest friend, and they say something that cuts deep, something that feels unfair, unjust, designed to hurt. Your immediate impulse is to fire back, to match their energy, to defend yourself with the same intensity they are using to attack you. Your chest is tight, your jaw is clenched. The words are right there, loaded and ready, and everything in you wants to let them fly. But you do not, because you have learned something they have not. That the person who loses, control first, loses the argument. Not because they are wrong, but because they have handed over their power. So instead of speaking, you pause. You count. 1, 2, 3. You feel the urge, but you do not act on it. You let the silence sit between you and the other person like a wall they cannot climb. And something remarkable happens. The silence absorbs the energy of their attack. It refuses to escalate. And when you finally do speak, if you choose to speak at all, your voice is calm, measured, devastatingly controlled. You do not defend. You do not attack. You simply state your boundary or your truth, and then you stop. And because you did not match their chaos, you have shifted the entire dynamic. You have taken the power back without ever raising your voice. The second battlefield is professional conflict. You are in a meeting and someone challenges you publicly. Maybe they question your competence. Maybe they undermine your idea in front of people whose opinions matter. Maybe they are trying to make you look bad, to elevate themselves. Your instinct is to defend yourself immediately, to prove them wrong, to show everyone in the room that you know what you are talking about. But that instinct is a trap, because the moment you become defensive, you look weak. The moment you over-explain, you look insecure. The moment you try too hard to prove yourself, you have already lost. So you stay silent. Not forever. Just long enough to let the challenge hang in the air. Long enough for everyone to feel the discomfort of it. And then, when you do respond, you do it with precision. You do not justify. You do not defend. You ask a question. A simple, direct question that forces the challenger to clarify their position. And in that question, you have flipped the dynamic. Now they are the one who has to explain themselves. Now they are the one on the defensive, and you remain calm, collected, and in control. Your silence preserved your dignity when reactivity would have destroyed it. The third battlefield is criticism. Someone criticizes you. Maybe they are right. Maybe they are wrong. Maybe they are trying to help. Maybe they are trying to hurt. It does not matter. Your instinct is to respond immediately. to explain why they are mistaken, or to acknowledge the criticism, and then justify why you did what you did. But both of those responses give away your power, because when you react to criticism, you signal that it has landed, that it has affected you, that the critic has power over you. Strategic silence is your shield. You hear the criticism, you absorb it, and you say nothing, or you say something so minimal that it gives nothing away. Thank you for the feedback. That is it. No explanation, no defense, no counterattack. Just acknowledgement and silence. And that silence communicates something far stronger than any defense could. It communicates that you are secure enough in yourself that external criticism does not shake you, that you do not need to justify yourself to anyone, that you will consider what was said on your own time, in your own way, and you do not owe anyone a performance of that process. The critic is left with nothing to push against, and you walk away with your power intact. The fourth battlefield is manipulation. Some people will use your words against you. They will take what you say, twist it, and weaponize it. They will bait you into revealing information and then use that information to control, undermine, or hurt you. And the only defense against manipulation is to give them nothing to work with. Silence denies them ammunition. When someone is fishing for information, probing for weaknesses, trying to get you to reveal something they can exploit, you stay quiet. You deflect. You give them strategic ambiguity. You answer without answering. And they leave the conversation frustrated because they got nothing from you. Nothing they can use. Nothing they can twist. You protected yourself by withholding. And that withholding was not weakness. It was wisdom. The fifth battlefield is failure. You failed. Publicly. Visibly. People saw it. People are talking about it. And your instinct is to explain, to give context, to make sure everyone understands that it was not entirely your fault, that there were circumstances beyond your control, that you are not as incompetent as the failure might suggest. But every word you say in defense of yourself diminishes you. Because strong people do not need to explain their failures. They acknowledge them, learn from them, and move forward. So you stay silent. You let the failure exist without commentary. You process it privately. You extract the lessons internally. And when you do speak about it, if you speak about it at all, it is with clarity and ownership. No excuses. No justifications. Just the truth and the path forward. And that silence in the immediate aftermath, that refusal to scramble and defend, communicates a level of confidence that words could never convey. The sixth battlefield is leadership. You are leading a team and something goes wrong. A problem arises. A mistake is made. And everyone is looking at you to fix it, to have the answer, to tell them what to do. Your instinct is to jump in immediately, to solve the problem yourself, to prove that you are capable and in control. But strong leaders know something that weak leaders do not. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is say nothing. Sometimes silence creates space for others to step up, to take ownership, to reveal themselves. So you pause. You let the silence sit. And you watch what happens. Who speaks first? Who takes initiative? Who tries to solve the problem without being told to? That silence reveals the real leaders on your team, and it teaches everyone that you are not going to do their thinking for them, that they are capable, that you trust them. And that trust, communicated through silence, builds stronger teams than any amount of micromanaging ever could. The seventh battlefield is betrayal. Someone you trusted broke that trust. They lied. They went behind your back. They hurt you in a way that feels unforgivable, and your instinct is to confront them, to demand an explanation, to make them understand how much they hurt you, to let them know exactly what you think of them. But here is the truth. People who betray you are not owed your words. They are not owed your energy. They are not owed the satisfaction of seeing how much they affected you. So you stay silent. Not because you are avoiding the situation, but because you are choosing not to give them access to you anymore. Your silence is the consequence. It is the boundary. It is the end of the relationship as it was, and it is far more powerful than any angry confrontation could ever be. Because silence leaves them with their guilt and nothing else. No closure, no absolution, just the weight of what they did, and the absence of you. The 8th battlefield is grief. You have lost something or someone important, and people expect you to talk about it, to share your feelings, to process out loud, but you do not owe anyone access to your grief. Grief is sacred. It is private, and silence is how you protect it. You do not need to explain how you feel. You do not need to perform your pain for others to validate it. You can sit in your silence, hold your grief close, and process it in your own time and in your own way. And that silence is not avoidance. It is honoring the depth of what you have lost by refusing to reduce it to words that could never capture it anyway. The 9th battlefield is crisis. Something catastrophic happens, a disaster, an emergency, a situation that demands immediate action, and everyone around you is panicking, talking over each other, proposing solutions without thinking them through, reacting instead of responding. And in the middle of all that chaos, you go quiet. You stop talking. You observe. You think. You let the noise happen around you while you process what actually needs to be done. And when you finally speak, your words cut through the chaos like a blade. Because while everyone else was reacting, you were thinking. And thinking, when everyone else is panicking, is the highest form of leadership. The fear that will arise in all of these situations is the fear of being misunderstood. You will worry that your silence will be interpreted as weakness, as avoidance, as not caring. And sometimes it will be. Some people will misunderstand you. Some people will project their own fears onto your silence and decide that it means something it does not. And you have to be okay with that, because the alternative, speaking to prevent misunderstanding, is giving up your power to manage someone else's perception of you. And that is a game you can never win. So you let them misunderstand. You let them think what they want. And you trust that the people who matter, the people who are worth your energy, will see your silence for what it is. Strength, control, wisdom. This is the fire. These are the moments when mastery is tested. And every time you pass the test, every time you hold your silence, when everything in you wants to break it, you prove to yourself that you are not the same person you used to be. You are not controlled by your impulses anymore. You are not a slave to your need to be understood, validated, or defended. You are free. And that freedom is the most powerful thing you will ever experience. Because freedom means you get to choose. And you are choosing silence, not because you have to, but because you know that silence, in these moments, is the only thing that makes sense. Silence, in these moments, is the only thing that makes sense. And now, after everything you have learned, after every tool you have practiced, after every moment of discomfort you have pushed through, you are standing at a threshold. On one side is the person you used to be, the one who talked too much, who filled every silence out of fear, who measured their worth by how much they contributed to conversations, who exhausted themselves trying to be heard and ended up being ignored. On the other side is the person you are becoming, the one who speaks with precision, who commands attention without demanding it, who sees what others miss because they have learned to observe instead of perform. And the threshold between these two versions of yourself is not something you cross once. It is something you cross every single day, with every choice, until one day you realize you are no longer crossing it at all. You are simply on the other side. And you have been for a while. You are no longer someone who tries to stay silent. You are someone who embodies strategic restraint. This is not a technique you are practicing. This is who you are now. The silence is not something you force. It is your natural state, your default response. The place you return to when the noise of the world gets too loud. And in that silence, you have found something most people spend their entire lives searching for and never find: power. Not the kind of power that comes from dominating others or forcing your will on the world. The kind of power that comes from being completely in control of yourself, from knowing that no one can make you speak, react, or reveal anything you haven't chosen to reveal, from understanding that your words are currency and you have learned to spend them wisely. Your silence is not withdrawal, it is presence. When you walk into a room now, people feel you before you say a word. There is a weight to you that was not there before, a gravity, an aura of someone who is paying attention, who is processing, who is thinking. You are no longer background noise trying to become foreground. You are the stillness in the center of the chaos, and stillness, when everything around it is moving frantically, becomes the thing everyone notices. You have stopped trying to be seen, and in stopping, you have become impossible to ignore. Your silence is not weakness, it is calculated strength. You know exactly when to speak and when to withhold. You know how to use a pause to create tension, how to let someone else fill the gap and reveal themselves, how to wait until the perfect moment to say the one thing that shifts the entire dynamic. You are playing a game that most people do not even know exists, while they are scrambling for airtime, trying to prove themselves with volume. You are gathering information. You are watching patterns. You are seeing the layers beneath the surface conversation. And when you do speak, your words land with the force of truth because they are backed by observation, strategy, and perfect timing. You have become the person who says less, but means more. And everyone around you feels it. You are now the person others lean forward to hear. When you speak, conversations pause. People stop what they are doing. They turn toward you. Not because you have raised your voice or demanded attention, but because your silence has taught them that when you do choose to speak, it is worth listening to. You have trained them, through your restraint, to value your words. And that value is not something you have to assert or defend. It is simply recognized. Your rare words carry disproportionate weight. One sentence from you does what 10 minutes of someone else's talking could not, because you have mastered scarcity, and scarcity creates demand. When your words are abundant, they are worthless. When they are rare, they are precious. You see 10 steps ahead because you have stopped talking and started observing. While everyone else is focused on the immediate moment, on winning the current argument, on making the next point, you are watching the larger pattern. You see where the conversation is going before it gets there. You understand people's motivations before they reveal them. You anticipate the next move because you have learned to quiet your own mind long enough to see clearly. And that clarity gives you an advantage that feels almost unfair. You are not smarter than everyone else. You are just less distracted. And in a world where everyone is drowning in noise, clarity is a superpower. Your relationships have transformed. The people who used to talk over you no longer do. Not because you fought for respect, but because you stopped giving them the opportunity to dismiss you. You stopped over-contributing, over-explaining, over-functioning. You stopped being the person who filled every gap. And in that space you created, they had to adjust. They had to learn to listen when you spoke. They had to learn that your silence was not an invitation to dominate. And the ones who could not adjust, the ones who needed you to be small and eager and always available with words, those relationships have faded. And you have let them, because you understand now that not every relationship is meant to survive your growth. And that is okay. The relationships that remain, the ones that have deepened, are with people who respect your silence as much as your words, who value your presence without needing you to perform, who see you, really see you, in a way that was impossible when you were hiding behind noise. Your professional life has shifted in ways that would have seemed impossible a year ago. You are no longer the person who has to fight to be heard in meetings. You are the person whose input is sought, whose opinion is valued, who is brought into important conversations because people trust your judgment. And that trust was not built through volume. It was built through precision, through the consistent demonstration that when you speak, you add value, that you do not waste time with redundant points or obvious observations, that you think before you talk. And that kind of reliability, that kind of strategic contribution, is what separates people who are tolerated from people who are essential. You have become essential, not because you do more, but because you do less, better. And internally, there is a peace that you did not know was possible. You are no longer at war with yourself, no longer replaying conversations in your head, wondering if you said too much or not enough. No longer obsessing over how you are being perceived. No longer exhausting yourself trying to control what other people think of you. You have let go of that burden. You have accepted that some people will misunderstand you, that some people will never appreciate you, that some people will always prefer the version of you that made them comfortable. And you have decided that their comfort is not your responsibility. You are no longer performing for an imaginary audience. You are simply living. And in that living, there is a stillness, a quiet confidence that makes everything easier. Decisions are clearer, relationships are simpler, life is lighter. Because you are no longer carrying the weight of everyone else's expectations. Silence is not the absence of your voice, it is the refinement of it. You have not lost your ability to speak, you have gained the ability to choose, and that choice has made your voice more powerful than it has ever been. Because now, when you speak, people know it matters. They know you are not just filling space. They know you have thought about what you are saying. They know your words have weight. And that weight is something you could never have created through volume. It was only possible through restraint. The world belongs to those who master the space between thoughts and words. Most people live in their thoughts, drowning in the constant stream of internal noise, and then they immediately convert those thoughts into words without ever stopping to evaluate whether those words serve them. But you have learned to live in the space, the gap, the pause, the place where impulse meets choice. And in that space, you have found freedom, the freedom to think without speaking, to observe without reacting, to process without performing. And that freedom has given you something that most people never have: control, not over the world, not over other people, but over yourself. And self-control, real self-control, is the foundation of every other form of power that exists. You are no longer 10 steps behind, scrambling to keep up, trying to prove that you belong. You are 10 steps ahead. You see what is coming before others do. You position yourself strategically while they are still reacting. You make decisions based on patterns they have not noticed. You influence outcomes without anyone realizing you are influencing them. Because you have learned that the loudest person in the room is rarely the most powerful. The most powerful person is the one who has learned to be quiet, to watch, to wait, and to speak only when their words will change everything. And the most beautiful part of this transformation, you are just beginning. This is not the end of the journey. This is the moment when you realize you have been preparing for something far greater than you understood when you started. Every pause you practiced, every silence you held, every moment of discomfort you pushed through, it was all building toward this, toward the person you are now. The person who does not need to talk to, feel alive, who does not need validation to feel whole, who does not need noise to feel important. You have become someone who is comfortable in the silence, and that comfort is magnetic. It draws people to you. It creates opportunities. It opens doors that were closed to the person you used to be. So step into this identity fully. Stop hedging. Stop doubting. Stop wondering if this is real. It is real. You are real. The transformation has already happened. You are no longer trying to become strategically silent. You are strategically silent. And now, the only question that remains is this: what will you do with that power? How will you use your silence to shape your life, your relationships, your career, your legacy? Because the world is waiting. Not for your words, but for your presence, for the calm in the center of the storm, for the person who can hold the silence while everyone else is screaming. That person is you, and the journey has only just begun.